Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the Middleton Affordable Housing Trust Committee. It is 6:08 PM. First order of business is to review and affirm minutes from our previous meeting.
Isn't he the first?
I thought Kevin's the
Kevin.
first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we do have a guest this evening, so we'll delay our items of topic board activities until that point, and we'll start off with Kevin Hurley. Kevin is with the North Shore Home Consortium. And Kevin, come on up. Feel free to actually, if you'd like to sit right there, you don't have to stand. If you want to stand, you can, or you can sit over here, whichever's more comfortable for you. Kevin, I want to thank you for whichever's good for you.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for agreeing to come before the board this evening. Our last meeting, we were talking about organizations in the greater North Shore and Merrimack Valley that we could work with in some of the efforts that we're implementing in our 5-year strategic plan. The North Shore Home Consortium has continued to come up on that list. I know Jackie reached out to you and you almost instantaneously responded with, "I'd love to be there. How can I help?" So thank you very much for that. And I appreciate you being here this evening, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me. I think you can hear me without the mic, sure. And so I'll start by describing what the consortium is. And it's an organization made up of 30 different cities and towns throughout the Merrimack Valley and the North Shore. And we've been in business since 1993, so about 30 years, bringing federal dollars into the region from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to be used exclusively for the development of affordable housing. And so I think this could be a good conversation at the beginning of a good relationship, and I am very pleased to be invited to be here with you tonight. The amount of funding that we receive from HUD is, I won't say it's modest, but it's not changed the world amounts of money, typically about $2.4 million a year, which is good to receive, but when you're distributing it throughout Essex County, essentially, you can only accomplish so much. But I will say that since we've been in business for a while, that does add up, so we can say that we've spent substantially over $70 million in the region to develop affordable housing. And of course, we'd like to give some of that to you. We really, we do allocate funds to our cities and towns because they decided they wanted that to be part of their original agreement. Mm-hmm. And the town of Middleton, I believe, was a charter member when we first decided to do this. And yet, I'll say honestly, that's not a great system, because if every community receives some allocation based upon population, the amount of money we set aside for each community is not likely to, it wouldn't be enough to build a house. I mean, if, for example, I think in Middleton, it's certainly well under $20,000 a year. And yet, we continue to do it year after year and ask, I think I bother Jackie most of the time, any ideas as to what you'd like to do with this money? If you have a project that you'd like to commit it to, if you have a developer knocking on your door that would like to do something, we could speak with you about committing even a modest amount to support that development. And most of our cities and towns don't really have significant developments going on a regular basis. Some of our communities do. Some of our larger communities are very active in creating affordable housing. Haverhill being the leader, they really love to access any kind of money they can, federal and otherwise, and they've done quite a lot in Haverhill. You may be aware of Beverly doing a lot in the downtown. In fact, I think one of their main streets,
Rantoul,
right, has been described as a canyon of new housing because there's so many new, not high-rise, mid-rise, 5-6-story high building, but they're creating housing, and in almost every development there's some level of affordability. We're doing a lot of work in Salem, a lot in Gloucester and Cape Ann. And most of our work is really not with the cities and towns themselves, but with the developers who want to work in that community. And so I think that would be the most important information I could convey to you tonight is that's kind of how it's done. That's how our work is done. And I think because the Trust is a relatively newer organization, you're thinking now about how do we engage these developers to come and look at Middleton, make decisions and work with them about the kind of scale we want to see, and what type of housing we think we need. I did take some time to look at, I think it's your housing production plan, and it's a great plan. And also I recognize in that plan, town officials are discovering the same things that everyone else in other towns are discovering. Like, my kids can't afford to buy a home in this town. They can't afford to live here, which seems like a tragic turn of events, but it is happening all over the place. Which is why we think creating more affordable housing is even more significant than it was before. So our office creates and releases an annual request for proposals. And we make sure it's distributed far and wide. Every one of our city halls and town halls gets a copy of it. Every developer that we know of gets a copy. And because we've been doing it for a number of years, we typically do get a lot of interest and information from housing developers who have decided to work in collaboration with the cities and towns in which they're intending to build. Right now, we have an RFP out on the street. We're offering $1.8 million, and the kind of proposals we expect to receive will be asking for varying chunks of money, sometimes $4 or $5 or $600,000. That isn't enough to build something, but it is significant that it is seen as funds that can be used to leverage other funds, larger pots of funds. And that's the way it happens in almost every instance. So when we have a committee working on this, we're calling it our allocation committee. We look for volunteers each year from our cities and towns. Right now we have someone from North Andover, from Beverly, from Rockport for the first time, and I think Hamilton too. So they're working on, they've reviewed the request for proposal, and they will review each proposal as it comes in. We typically get 12 or 15 and sometimes more proposals. So most often there's requests for funds that might be triple what we have to commit to the projects. However, we do a lot of work with not only HUD, but with state officials and the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. And our colleagues at HLC have said, unless there is a commitment of local funds to a project, when someone comes in and asks us for a larger amount, like a few million, we see that proposal as dead on arrival, unless there's some local commitment in whatever form. It doesn't have to be from the home program. It could be from a housing trust. It could be from CPA funds.
CPA funds, yeah.
And it could be a combination of all three, and other funds.
Land donations, does that count as match?
I think it could, depending on the value of the land, and it would be the judgment of the state officials reviewing it to make that judgment. But I think that probably would see that as a strong commitment of
The $2+ million that you receive annually,
yes.
is that CDBG funds?
It is not. It's a total separate and distinct program called the Housing Investment Partnership Program.
Okay.
And because back when they invented it, they didn't want to call it the hippie program, I guess. They decided we'll call this the HOME program. So HOME is an acronym for Housing Investment Partnership. Don't ask me to explain why. But so it's separate and distinct from CDBG. And yet we work very closely with CDBG on, Peabody receives CDBG where I'm based, and many of our communities do. Some are entitlement communities. I think you've heard of that. So Haverhill, Gloucester, Salem are entitlement communities, and they get chunks of CDBG funds, and then an annual allocation of home funds from our office. And then to finish that thought, if a city or town doesn't have a project actively emerging, it's our policy to, I hate to use the word scoop it back, but we reallocate those funds to our competitive pool, which is how we have the dollars to finish projects.
So your RFP that's on the street now, is that usually a late summer, early fall process annually?
It's turned into that over the last several years. We tried to get it out on the street by about Labor Day, so we did. Proposals are due to be received by Friday, October 18th.
So where we are in our process is, our housing trust is fairly new. We worked with a consultant to develop a 5-year action plan. We've got 7 focus areas that we're focusing on that run the gamut from items like preserving the deed-restricted properties we have today and ensuring that those remain as much as possible deed-restricted, to efforts to diversify our housing stock, efforts to communicate with other boards and committees in town that have domain control over zoning. We've got representatives of the planning board here, we have representatives of the housing authority, select board, finance committee, members at large, the Community Preservation Act committee. And so we've got this 7 items within our action plan, but we're also simultaneously, there are other activities that are happening in town that this board may not be leading, but the select board that I serve on, we are, as you probably saw when you drove down 114, we're building a whole new municipal complex at the old golf course. So our current town hall is going to become vacant at some point in the near future. So there may be opportunities to look at that site for affordable housing. So we're in the infancy of the stages of these items. And part of that is looking at developers or organizations that are interested in doing something in partnership with the town. Now, what that partnership will look like, we don't know yet. The partnership could be what you just mentioned of land.
Yep.
The partnership could be tax increment financing models to encourage folks to come in and develop. Some of the process may be looking at zoning changes, or we have another large parcel of land in town that we were originally going to use for a for our elementary school. That is no longer going to be used for that because we built our school elsewhere. We're discussing, this committee will probably provide recommendations, but the select board are starting to have discussions about, can we do something on the deed when we sell this property to make it smaller homes, smaller lots, smaller, more condensed, to make them more lowercase affordable, and other items like that that we may work with developers on. But we also realize that, it's not lost on any of us that, there's a development in town that's happening that a single-family lot in that development is going for $675,000. So immediately affordability's gone. And, a developer's not gonna buy a lot for $675,000 and then build an affordable home on it. So there's things that we need to do. And so I'm interested in understanding the schedule on the RFP that you do regularly. But secondly, there are other smaller things that we're looking to do that I'm not sure if Home could be a partner with us. For example, I'm very concerned about individuals' ability to age in place in Middleton because our housing stock is getting so expensive. And this isn't lost on just Middleton. This is a phenomenon that's happening everywhere. So as much as I'm concerned at what you mentioned of our kids can't afford to buy in these towns, I'm also concerned about our seniors' ability to stay in the home, or their ability to actually do improvements to the home that will allow them to stay there. Accessibility improvements, life and safety improvements, and others. So we're starting to feed and seed funds within our Affordable Housing Trust and hopefully segregate some of these to support those efforts. Are there ever grant programs that Home does around that?
We've done some of that over our history, and we're doing less and less of that right now, to be frank. The way it would work, as we see it, would be a community would decide to have, let's say, a home improvement program or housing improvement program. They could focus it on seniors living in their own homes. We've done a lot of that. In fact, we even tried to do that on a small regional basis, including 3 or 4 neighboring communities to work together. And to my surprise, the cost of renovations or adaptive reuse or to make it sustainable for a person to live was so unexpectedly high, it became almost impossible to do it. By high, I mean like $125,000, $130,000 to do the renovations needed. And we just really couldn't afford it. Even in communities that I perceived to have high housing costs, like Marblehead, we worked there, and people in Marblehead, including seniors, had been unable to maintain the property in the way that they intended to, so the repairs were numerous and expensive, which is why the program really was discontinued in almost every community. I think we have Methuen doing some on a small scale, and they limit how many dollars they will allow a household.
Which is likely what we're going to have to do. I mean, I know that there are other programs from, state Medicaid programs and others that will also improve for accessibility. And so what we're in the phase of identifying the dollars that we have, how best to utilize those in the short, medium, and long term. We're in the phase of looking at properties that we have in town that we may want to partner with organizations with. I don't think the town wants to be in the business of developing and owning affordable housing. It's not the business we want to be in. But we're also looking at ways that we can chip away at different affordability efforts, whether it's small-scale accessibility projects, it's somebody that is at risk of no longer being able to stay in this community, or possibly being able to extend their ability to stay as a resident, and efforts like that. And so part of that will be, what are we going to fund? What are ways that we can help cobble together a funding mechanism? Or are there other organizations, we're talking with groups like Habitat for Humanity and others that may be able to lean in on that effort. So seeing how the Affordable Housing Trust can be an aggregator of that as well.
And so where I'm based at City Hall in Peabody, they have created a modest scale homeowner rehab program that I think is mostly intended to help seniors. And yet Peabody doesn't have a housing rehab program and doesn't have any staff there to implement it, which is really what is needed. So they've contracted with Habitat for Humanity to do that. And I think it's limited as to how many units per year they could do, maybe 2 or 3 a year in that one community. And I believe they're using CDBG funds primarily for that instead of using the home funds. In fact, I know that's true.
Okay.
So that might be an option for you to pursue. I will say that you understand it's federal money, so there are rules and regulations that govern how they might be used.
Yeah.
One of the things that the feds require us to do is to complete a housing market analysis and needs assessment. And we're required to do that every 5 years. And we're in the process of starting that process again to have that work completed by April or May.
And do you do that for the entire region that you cover, or just where you're doing projects?
No, we are required to do it for the region.
Including drilling down to community-specific, will you say, here's what it means for Middleton, here's what it means for Linfield, here's what it means for Marblehead?
It's more by housing type. If there's housing for the disabled in one community, or housing for the elderly, or housing for any particular population, then we would identify that in each community, but not have a specific focus on Linfield, for example.
Okay, understood.
And so that seems to be working, but again, I should only speak frankly to you. As a result of that needs analysis, over the last 10 years, we've totally abandoned the idea of providing first-time home buyer assistance. We learned that people who are getting into the ownership market, although they might value having a little boost, like $10,000 to help them buy their first home, their needs are not nearly as great as someone who's unhoused, living in their car, forced to live in long-term care because they can't find a place to live. So our focus has been substantially on the creation of affordable rental housing throughout the region. And that seems to be in sync with what the state is doing lately and with people who are in the development world are looking to do right now. We almost never see an ownership project, except we allow for it as long as the ownership will serve a household at a certain income level.
Yeah.
So let's say 60% of median income. And few developers are doing that, very few, and one of them is Habitat for Humanity. So every year when we have our RFP out, they almost always come in with one or two projects. Please give us $100,000 or $200,000 to help us acquire and construct, often a duplex in whatever community they happen to be working in. We've done 20 or 25 of them over time.
And are they usually doing projects that become deed restricted?
Always.
Okay.
Always deed restricted. And I think Habitat likes to do a deed restriction in perpetuity.
Yeah.
And many people have advised us that that might not be a good idea because who can predict what's going to happen 20, 30 years from now? Maybe that's not a good idea for that particular site. And so our federal requirements, our federal regulations require that we would require affordability for a period of 20 years.
Okay.
And then at the end of that, because we would make these funds available in the form of a loan to the developer at a zero rate of interest with no monthly payments, if they fulfill their obligation, then they could ask for that loan to be forgiven if it never fails to forgive it.
Forgive.
So we don't call it a grant, but it could be converted into a grant after a period of time. So affordable rentals is really what we're looking at a lot right now.
Well, I think that the rationale for that is, two of us were chatting before the meeting started just about, again, back to the point of affordability and ability for young today to purchase. I mean, a new first-time home buyer is either looking at a 20% down payment or a private mortgage insurance PMI payment. And, you know, it's difficult in today's rate environment and inflationary environment to afford what that payment will be. Add to that the need to put 20% down when the cost of housing has, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy here of, and folks are renting, and the weirdness of this, and many times they're renting at a cost higher than what their purchase cost would be, but it's the entrance fee of it. And I don't think, and I personally don't believe, grants or government funding for down payment are going to solve the issue.
It's gonna be like schools, it's just gonna drive the price up.
Exactly, that's exactly what it's going to do.
Absolutely.
So there are, as you probably know, there are several down payment assistance programs. We used to have one community by community. If a community wanted to use their funds for homebuyer assistance, and it was popular. We got some votes, but we learned that it didn't really change what was
Well, it
happening.
reared its head again recently, just in the presidential election, where
Right.
both sides are talking about abilities to have people be able to afford to buy a home and through down payment assistance. It's somebody's going to pay for it in the end, and it's usually going to pay more for that property because of it.
Where production becomes the actual way to move this lever. So,
So I was looking forward to this. I made copies of several different materials, but then with some strange car issues this afternoon, I realized that as I was traveling here, that the tote bag filled with all those materials is in the auto repair shop right now.
Well, maybe you can send it to Jackie, she could
So I
just.
did. I can send it certainly.
Yeah, feel free to send it over,
I will.
and we can have it distributed amongst the members.
types of things I was bringing with me was a review of what happened in our last funding cycle. Who asked for the money? What did they propose to do with it? How many dollars were they allocated for this? And
So if I could ask a question around that. So you told me that Habitat for Humanity seems to be an annual applicant to your RFP process. Are there similar other developers that are very regular participants? Like, is there a cadre of 10, 12 organizations, developers, not-for-profits that are out there doing this? Or is it really every cycle you see a new batch of folks?
somewhere in between that.
Okay.
I would like to say there's a cadre of 10 or 12. There's really a cadre of about 3 or 4
Okay.
who are actively seeking funds from our office and have the depth of experience and the staffing to implement what they say they're going to do. And I expect you've heard of most of them. One of the more prominent ones is an organization that has just changed its name to Light Homes
Oh, yes, out of Beverly, right?
out of Beverly.
Yes.
They are going full speed ahead, gangbusters. Last year, actually 3 or 4 years ago, they asked for funding from us to supplement the funding for a place called Anchor Point 1, which is housing for families with 3 and 4 bedrooms in the units. And recently, they asked for funding for Anchor Point 2, which was another 44 units for families with similar sized bedrooms. And today it was announced that Light Homes received a grant to help them in their mission to create, they're calling it the Lighthouse Project, but it's a structure between the 2 residential properties that would provide daycare, job training, financial literacy training, parenting skills, recovery programs, a long list of anything you can imagine that would be a supportive service to a family that might be in any state of what their needs are. And it seems to be, I mean, they're describing this is the way to go. I mean, families who are struggling and trying to find a place to rent, and even affordable rents are expensive. So that would be kind of at the top of the list. Light Homes would be something you might want to check out. Their website is very fulsome in their description of what they're doing, where they're doing it. They're doing it everywhere. They're good projects in Rockport and Hamilton, working at London Road, and of course 6 or 7 in Beverly, and working at a place in Peabody. They've got something in Denver, so they're doing a lot of work. And the executive director is very well respected at the state level, to the point where I think he's now the chairman of the board of Citizens Housing and Planning Association.
Jaffa, yeah.
And so they're doing good work, I have to say. We're always enthusiastic to fund them. It's never typically.
Never a guarantee.
Well,
I know you can't say that.
We can never give them all that they ask for.
Exactly.
Although last cycle, we had an infusion of funds on a temporary basis from the American Rescue Plan
Yeah,
Act.
ARPA.
They asked for money for that Anchor Point 2, and when we funded them at a modest level of, I don't know, $600,000 or something like that, and funded 2 of their other projects in different communities, they came back to us and said, please help us. They put it in writing, describe what was going on. Please help us fund this one project to create the family housing and take the funding away from these other 2 projects in other communities. We can wait until next year for that. And we ended up giving them $1.6 million, which was, for us, significant. I think that's about the biggest amount we've ever committed to a project. And we won't always have ARPA. In fact, we got committed pretty quickly. So that's one. Locally, the group called the North Shore Community Development Coalition, which is based in Salem, done some projects, well, many projects in Salem, but they're reaching out. They've done quite a bit in Beverly.
Did they do the Manchester project recently? Is that the Manchester by the Sea?
That might have been Harbor Light. They did one in downtown Gloucester, family housing. And they're looking at, they think they're looking at a Manchester site.
I think they might be.
So that's one. Who else is doing it? there was a group in Haverhill that was doing a fair amount of it, and they seem to have like stepped back a bit. Staffing issues in some cases. And other developers that are not local, like wind developer.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Wind,
Oh, yeah.
they're doing things in Swampscott and Salem and other places. Of course, they're a high-powered team that has a massive staff and capacity to do whatever they choose to do. We've done some work with a group called the Planning Office of Urban Affairs, which is the housing division of the Archdiocese of Boston, Catholic Archdiocese. So we helped them to build 50 units on the site of a former church, which had been cleared away, and there were 50 units. I think there were about 200 applicants for those 50 units. And of course, in the lottery, where someone's name is pulled out of a hat. It's a very emotional day for people who are waiting for housing. So we have that kind of activity. They seem to be in sync with the consortium's mission of let's create some affordable rental, and we're trying to make it as deeply affordable as possible so that families and individuals with very modest incomes can afford to come in.
So I was going to add, that was on my list of questions to ask. In your annual RFP process, do you give a preference to, and I have a bad habit of calling it big A and small, capital A and lowercase a affordable. Now, there's affordable based on federal poverty standards, and then there's, the efforts based on affordable, i.e. not at market rate. Do you give more of your preference in funding to programs that are under the federal standard of, 138% of the federal poverty level? I can't remember what the percentage is.
Frankly, again, we tend to ignore those higher standards. We focus, and we state in our RFP, we'll give additional consideration to a developer who will set aside units to serve a household at 50% of median, or if you can serve a household at 30% of median, you'll receive consideration for funding. And in fact, because of the situation that we see throughout our region, we ask people to consider setting aside units to serve the homeless families and homeless individuals. And it's happening. And HLC is pretty much doing the same thing. I'd like to take credit for how much we've done, but it's really the collaboration of state funding and local funding that is making that happen. Someone asked me to do a calculation of how many units are you creating right now, setting aside housing units for families and individuals, and in the last, 16 months, we have 91 units set aside to serve homeless families and homeless individuals. Often they'll need supportive services to help them stay where they are, and those will be funded by others. For example, the Lighthouse Project.
The work, the Harbor Light, yeah.
But the state is really focusing on trying to get people off the streets, get them indoors and to a permanent place. And so we have 91 units in the pipeline for that population specifically.
And is that the same kind of 20-year commitment that the other affordable
Yes.
are? Yeah.
And again, speaking frankly, housing developers, in my opinion, they're very well intentioned and they're working hard to serve populations in need, but they also want to make some money. So to have the affordability go away at some point. And if it was a loan of $1 million, well, we're forgiving that loan, so it makes that nonprofit developer more viable so that they can do more. And they point that out to us all the time, of course. So we're happy to convert the loan into a grant once the criteria have been met. And even our colleagues at the feds have recommended go with the federal standards because it really makes it harder for us, our office, to enforce it. If we used to do 30 years and more, and we just don't have enough staff to go out and monitor and just make sure that everyone's doing that. So we've pretty much kept it a 20-year period of affordability for everything we do right now. And if someone comes in and offers more, we say, thanks, but we'd rather stay with the 20 years. Because our admin budget is limited, and so we have to monitor every project year after year to make sure they're complying with everything, so it seems to be working.
Okay.
So I guess I'm hoping that, I mean, I did read your plan, or parts of it at least, and the goals are so realistic, and yet, of course, many different ways of looking at this. The idea of keeping seniors in place is a major issue throughout the entire state. And whenever I have conversations with seniors, number one issue. I'm overhoused, I don't want to be in this place. Who could help me to make a conversion or sell this or do something, or maybe I could take in some tenants. How do we work this? And it isn't being done enough. I mean, I've actually reached out to the services of Massachusetts to ask them to consider implementing some programs that would help seniors to remain in place or find a place that they would feel comfortable with. And it just isn't happening right now. Well,
This was helpful. I don't know if any other folks on the committee has some questions. This was helpful. I think what I'd like to do is look at some of both your current RFP and your past RFPs and understand like some of the projects that are coming before you. Because again, we're looking at short, medium, and long-term efforts here. But we do have 2 significant parcels in town that we may, as a town, not just this committee, look at some affordability options, and understanding that those options would need partners to either lead or partner with us on. And, I think this committee can help be creative in ways that we can make that attractive, but also make sure that what is being proposed is actually what is needed in this town. And some of it is, I don't want to build it and hope they will come, but also build it and it not be successful, because then the opportunity is lost and then lost for good.
well, I mean, you're right to think that way. However, successful, I guess, would mean, will it be rented or sold or something? If anyone builds some housing today, it's probably going to be used.
Things are being sold that I can't believe are being sold, so.
Yes.
One thing that I will offer, and just referring back to some of the developers that we work with, I'm a little surprised but appreciate their sentiment. Developers have now told me, we're looking at scale now. We really don't want to build 8 units or 10 units or 12 units. You mentioned town hall, I don't know how many units could fit into that, or even with an expansion of it, or doubling the size. It may not be attractive enough for the number of units that could be produced on that site to bring in certain developers. But it may, I mean, it depends on the
Yeah,
site.
we've started to look at it. I think Studio Lou's came back with, 4 units on the existing footprint, but it's a fairly large size.
Could be like 4, there were options that were like 4, 6, and 8.
Yeah, 4, 6, and 8 units.
And so there are some other state programs that are intended to develop things on a small scale. And so maybe, okay, 6.
That'd be great.
Just be aware of them. Sounds like you're looking at everything and all of your options, but
Herman, come on up.
Hello. Hello. Nice to meet you.
Okay.
So a quick overview, I mean, that's sort of a description of how our process works. We're willing to develop housing just about anywhere, but if there's a community that hasn't done much lately, we're really interested in seeing something happen there. So if you could engage some developers in some discussions about what you want to do and scope it out and see what your goals are. Of course, we'd be happy to talk with you, but I think it may be more productive if the developer were to talk with us.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
Look at our process and see if they want to access some of these dollars. And as I say, it does help to leverage much larger amounts. Projects, I'll stop in a minute, but projects typically have funding from 7 or 8 other sources, maybe 3 or 4 different state funds, the Federal Home Loan Bank, low-income tax credits, CDAC, and other projects. So it's assembling like the pieces of a puzzle to make it work.
So a question, Kevin, have you seen any success in the process of a town or a city issuing an RFI to potential developers or organizations for a parcel?
I haven't seen a lot of success, but I would expect it would be worth the effort.
Okay,
Who knows who's out there?
yeah.
We typically do a lot to vet any particular developer, and we did hear from someone who wanted to build 20 units, and it was an idea he had, no prior experience, and didn't want to ask anyone else for any money, and so it really didn't have legs, couldn't move forward. But you could do that and just see who's interested. I mean, what a great community, you know, who wouldn't want to build something in Middleton? So maybe you might consider doing something like that.
Okay.
And then there are other state organizations that could help you along and coach you through that process.
Well, we're learning to crawl, walk, and run here, so.
I commend you for your efforts, and I think you'll do well. It may just take a little while to.
Well, it has taken this town and others a long period of time to get where we are. We're not going to get to where we want to be overnight.
But you do have CPA.
Yeah, we do have CPA, and I give a lot of credit to our Community Preservation Act Committee, and we have a member of the committee that serves on this, but also town meeting for allocating the dollars, and it seems to be an annual process of using a portion, if not a significant portion, or all of our affordable housing piece of the CPA dollars to bring to this trust. Now, it's going to take time till we get some critical mass of funds to support, but, you know, it's also going to take some time to find those projects that make sense as well, so.
Sounds like you're on your way.
We're getting there, so. Well, Kevin, I really appreciate you coming in. Feel free to send the stuff off to Jackie. She'll distribute to us, and I'd welcome the opportunity, if we have some questions, if I or other members could reach out to you at some point.
Of course, yes, I welcome that.
Okay.
Thanks again.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you very
Kevin,
much.
thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Good information.
Okay, back to the administrative items. We have before us minutes from the September 4th, 2024 meeting. I don't know if there are any questions on the minutes that are before you.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes of September 4th.
Okay, there's a motion, is there a second? There's a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, if any?
I'm going to abstain.
And one abstention. Okay. Next on the agenda is our working session on the 5-year action plan. So we decided that, while we talked a little bit about this at the last meeting, we were going to have a full complement of our membership here this evening. So we wanted to finalize more of the working session on our 5-year action plan. So as we've talked about this evening, as part of the action plan, there's really 7 focus areas that have been identified in our action plan. And some of those we're starting to work on already, which is communication and outreach and education. Part of that is just our first foray into communicating with the public here in Middleton. One of them is the Council on Aging newsletter. I'm going to distribute to everybody a copy of, and thank you, Jackie, for getting us started on this, of, if you could pass that out, of a short, supposed to be about 400 or 500 word. I've made some edits. Bill's made a few edits. I would welcome everybody this evening, if you have some edits to this and would like to see some changes, if you could please get those edits to me Friday?
We need to submit to Jillian on Friday to be published.
If you could get these to me by close of business tomorrow, or before you leave here today, take your red pen out and feel free. It's a
Put in
small.
Word here, so if people want to see.
So I made a little bit of changes. I should have sent it out electronic.
That's okay.
But if folks want to go through, and if there's any edits that you think are needed, feel free to get it to me tomorrow. We will get this in the pipeline. And quite honestly, I just want to put a stake in the ground and a flag in the ground here and start our communication with this and start rolling this out. And there'll be other efforts. As we talked about at our last meeting, I'm trying to remember at our last meeting, Bill, you weren't here, and Beth, you weren't here. What we did talk about is our website. And feel free to take a look at our website as it exists today, but opportunities for us to place on that website bits of information that could help educate the public. I mean, for example, when this newsletter goes out, I'd love to see a PDF of the newsletter put on the website as well. Yes, and as part of the website, if there's ways that we can put in that, on that site, graphics, graphs, and others that really showcase what we know the issues are, you know, as part of the review that was done by our consultant of, you know, what the income level is needed to purchase a home today in Middleton. What that means to first-time home buyers, what's that mean to folks that are looking to downsize, what that means to a developer that's going to develop in this town. Why are they not developing smaller and more affordable homes? All of these items, I think when you see it in graphic or graph format, it stands out a lot more than a statement of a bullet. So I'd welcome everybody again to give some thought of the website. I actually spent some time looking at it, but also looking at our overall improved website across the entire town. It's much more intuitive, and I think we have the ability to drive folks to that site and use that as a landing page. A perfect example is the site for our development that's happening in town. There's been thousands of hits.
Thousands, yeah.
Thousands of
Monthly.
hits, monthly and daily, that are happening. So why people are interested in the efforts and the work that we're going to be doing, there will be folks in town that will be interested, but at some point, as we start opening our aperture to developers and others and what our thinking is, folks are going to come back and look at the town and see what our efforts are and what our communications are. So a piece on that.
Brian, quick question. Do we have a way to find out from different groups or organizations within Middleton that answer questions related to affordable housing? If we could find out what those are, so that we can put it
Groups
as
that we could go speak with and others?
Yes.
Yeah, so a perfect example is during our annual budget process, there are several organizations and groups in town, in neighborhoods, that our town administrator, our finance committee reps, our select board reps go out and meet with. A perfect example is Fuller Pond.
Yep.
Another example is the high-rise over in over near the Ferncroft. Because, you know, over at the Ferncroft, there's always been a complaint that they're the segment of our community that has seemed to be somewhat ignored, and there's a large population over there. And quite honestly, they're different than the normal developments in town. There are a lot more folks living in a smaller footprint, which is exactly the discussion that we're having. So we already have a relationship of the ability to go in and speak to groups like that. Similarly, our veteran service officer has developed relationships with some veterans and veteran supporting individuals in town that we have used as sounding boards and individuals and groups to reach out to ask questions, that we get feedback that has been helpful to us. Again, the Council on Aging has been another as well. I also think there's ways that we can use other sources to put information out. In the past, we've worked with MELD of being able to put information in monthly bills. We've worked.
Water too, right? So
We've worked.
they do the water
Yep.
bills every so
Water
often, too,
has
right?
done that. We've
Yep.
worked with the schools for providing information that they could give to students to bring home to parents on items and topics as well. So I think there's ways that we can look at if there is, a perfect example is if the point is going to come that this town's going to do anything affordable in a development-wise or partnership-wise on even those two properties that we've talked about, it's going to be more than a public hearing and a public meeting. We're going to have to be very aggressive of going out and talking to folks and talking about the vision and making sure that folks in town understand it, buy into it, and agree to it. Because success isn't going to be a one project and done. If we do one project and it's successful and people see how it's been successful, then others will flow. So I actually think communication is probably key to all of these 6 other topic areas being successful.
I think it might make sense also to have something on the website where we're getting like maybe an email that's for the trust, Jackie, that.
It's already set up.
Is it set up? So there's something on the site that allows folks to hit us up with questions or hit us up
It
with
is
comments, thoughts, all that stuff?
Housing Trust at Middleton@ma.gov, and it comes as a sub inbox to my email.
I love it.
We have received 0 emails.
So clearly we got to promote that. I
So if
assume
you ever need to
somebody-
get in touch
yes.
with Jackie, there's multiple emails you can get in touch with.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. They will all come here.
I can never hide.
But, I mean,
Wouldn't want
that's a good point, Bill, because, the thing that that concerns me about as we continue to open the aperture of communication with folks is there's I'm not going to say stigma, but there's a built-in belief that when you start talking about affordable housing, people have different beliefs what that means. We saw it when the 40B project was being proposed in town. I had people calling me saying, this is going to be a high-rise building of Section 8 units.
Yeah.
No, that's not what it's going to be. And sometimes it takes a life of its own, whether it's on social media or folks not understanding what affordable means in the concept, in the context of what that development would mean. So if something was done affordable over in Locust, or something was done affordable at where Memorial Hall is, it may not be affordable in the context that individuals are thinking. And so if we're not educating on that, that project's going to fail. If we're not educating with developers of what our vision is, we're not going to get the right developers that are going to want to partner with us. If we're asking town meeting to give us approval to do things around tax financing or other efforts to make this more attractive, we're not going to get footing at town meeting and efforts. So communication is key.
Thank you to you and Bill did this, right?
Well, I'm going to give most of the credit
To
to Jackie, who
Oh,
got the
Jackie.
ball rolling on this, and,
Jackie.
We just provided a couple of markups, right? So.
yeah, I mean, here's
Thank
the
you,
deal, this
Jackie.
is a small column in a newsletter,
Right.
as much as I would like, I'm the guy that wants to write 4 paragraphs on each bullet point.
No.
It's not going to work unless they give us the
My
entire
edits for you.
newsletter. Thank you.
Here are my edits.
We've
My
never,
name's spelled wrong.
Oh,
I think going for the
Ian. Herman
7,
is Clark.
like laying out the 7 principles is a great way to start.
Yep.
I feel like the start could maybe have a little bit more of a conversational tone. But
I think that's kind of the idea. I think honestly, the website should be very informative. I mean, I think that's the goal. The idea of the graphics and really focusing on what it costs to buy a house as an entry-level person or to age in place as a senior. Those are the keys.
or did you know?
Did you know that it costs this much to, you need to be making X amount of dollars as a, kid out of college?
Did
to
you know
buy something?
the cost of an average home in Middleton today is 900 and, I always forget this, 50 some odd thousand?
940.
940.
940? Yeah.
The other thing that we could do with the graphics too, because I do have some graphics on the website now, but we could certainly also work with Paul if you wanted to do like a quick video that could go on the cable channel and be on the video on demand. A remarkable amount of people watch our video on demand videos, partially because we have a very cool cable access director named Paul Pellicelli. But also just a lot of people can't always come to our meetings. So maybe like a video with all the graphics might be an engaging way. Because people do also, I talk to a lot of folks when I'm out and about in town that only consume our media through our cable channel. They don't look at our website.
Right.
So maybe that's something that can hit different audiences in different ways. But we have so much content from the strategic plan.
Yeah, we did that with the buildings project, right? And that worked out pretty well. We got a ton of views on that.
And
so.
we're gonna have another, like this week, it's a way people really do communicate with us. They do get a lot of information from that. So that's something that we could certainly work
Quick
with Paul
PowerPoint
on.
around the 7 themes. I think might be the way to go.
Could we add that, what you just said, and the email address onto this article to go in the Council on Aging?
Yeah, so I think that would be a good point. We have the town's website on here. What we don't have is the full link, and I was going to actually mention this to Jackie. We don't have the full link of the Affordable Housing Trust. We probably should have that be the link to the Affordable Housing Trust page, but at the same time,
Add the email,
yeah, add the email of, and you said it's,
Housing Trust, all lowercase, no spaces, at middletonma.gov. And for those interested in checking out our website, you can find it directly at www.middletonma.gov/735/affordable-housing-trust.
735/.
Affordable-housing-trust.
You like the tone of her voice.
It's my commercial voice.
I noticed that. Your drama days,
Exactly.
or theater days, excuse me.
Okay, we'll make those edits on that as well, and if everybody could think of ways that we could have other opportunities, I think the video would be great.
Is someone willing to narrate? Because we can pull
I
it
think
off.
you'd be the best narrator,
We
what you just.
really don't want that for any of us, respectfully.
Why?
Yeah, we'll,
If you have a narration you need read, I can do the narration.
between one of us here, we'll come up with a narrator on it, and I think, why don't we do this? I'm willing to add my time to this. If there's somebody else that wants to work with me, if the two of us can come up with, Beth, I don't know if this is something,
Yeah.
Beth and I, if folks are comfortable, we will work on developing kind of the structure of what we would want to see included in that video that would be both on the public access channel, but also on our video on demand, and then have a link that sits right on our homepage. Sure. But it's a video that, if anybody's been watching lately, our Facebook page has been regularly posting just different updates of things that's going on in town. And folks are starting to actually respond. Now, some are responding with, hey, this is great, thanks. Others are responding with how people like to respond on social media, but that's okay. I appreciate that they're clicking on it and reading it. And if they still
Engagement either
click on
way.
and they watch this video, that's all I want
Means you're
accomplished.
relevant.
Yeah,
What
well,
is-
Comment
yeah,
is
I agree.
relevant.
I agree.
Do we need a motion for something like that, Brian, or is that?
well, I think we need a motion. We'll
Per
just,
se?
I think Beth and I will work on
Okay.
that in our next meeting. We'll come back with kind of a scope on this, and included in that is, I'm a bad PowerPoint guy, but maybe we could work jointly on a slide each, or something that's somewhat graphical each, that would be both on the video that we could put up, but also could be a good slide summary of the 7
Yep.
areas that are included.
We can also set you up with, you have the Google Drive for the Affordable Housing Trust, so you can do the Google version of PowerPoint, and that way, if it's just two of you, you can collaborate on it as long as it's not more than that. But then it's also in the trust's database that we've been building of documents
On the Google.
on the
We'll use
Google.
the
I think we
Google.
can all edit if need be, or
Yeah.
suggest stuff, right?
Not under the open meeting law, you
You
can't.
can't, right? That's what I was asking.
Yeah.
So we can't really do that, because
So
that's
But we
more
technically
can, two
collaborating,
people
right?
can.
We can set the visibility until we come back and present it, at which point you turn it to view
Yeah,
only for
look at-
everybody.
so we
That
can
makes
look
sense.
at
Okay,
it.
cool.
Yeah.
I like it.
Beth can set that, because I
Or
have no
even if
idea
it's
how
a
to do that.
presentation during the
It's all over.
meeting, or you could present it like on the
Oh,
screen
yeah.
or something for us during a meeting.
Yeah. And then the goal of these would be just education, context.
I mean, I think the goal, at least from my
Alignment.
perspective, I think whatever we're trying to highlight on the website, we kind of want to reinforce in the video. That's kind of I think that's kind of the thought process, right?
As Jackie said, most people are looking at the videos versus
Yeah.
the web, yeah.
I mean,
I
like,
like that.
I was out of the country at our last select board meeting.
You're bragging.
One night, I actually went online when I was away and watched our meeting on demand, just to,
While you were in Italy?
well, I
You're
couldn't
kidding
sleep.
me.
But, no, I mean, I
Don't
watched,
do that.
I watch
Shame
most
on
of the
you.
meetings if I'm unable to make it. And
But not when you're
you
in
can do the
Italy.
same thing with these meetings.
I think it'd be too nice to be there to do
Yeah,
that.
well,
Or you were trying to sleep, Brian.
yeah, that was it. So, I think we know where we want to be on informed decision-making, and to Herman's point of community feedback. I think in the beginning, we have to go and ask for the feedback.
Yep.
And I think after a while, feedback will start to come.
So to that end, the newsletter column is due on Friday. I also can work with Jillian if you'd like to do some sessions that we've previously talked about. I can set about booking those, and connecting with you with her on how those typically get scheduled. We have our veterans that meet on Tuesdays for brunch. We also have our COA Board of Directors that they do like an open lunch with all of the participants certain Wednesdays of the month. So I tend to go there to talk about different things. I went with various members of the building committee last fall. I've gone with, Dr. Morrison when we were prepping for the override discussions as a way to tell people what's going on. I give usually about a 5 or 6 minute snippet of what's happening, and then I try to go to every table and answer questions. So we could certainly put that on the schedule. That is helpful, because then you'll have the article in the column, the video, and then this is like the next step. Let people ask some questions.
Yep.
That's good.
Just let me know who you think from the trust will be there, so we can coordinate schedule.
Well, I think it would be helpful to Beth and I to get done the work that we're going to do around, this is kind of like we're developing our stump speech,
Yeah.
which is our talking points. Once we get those refined and everybody's comfortable with what
Yeah, it's kinda
the
how we did
piece
it,
is,
yeah.
then I think we can then start to look at, hey, the COA can put together a session on this date, or, folks over at the Ferncroft are willing to entertain us for a meeting that we can go over, and not surprisingly, we'll get a good crowd over there. And, if we walk out of there with folks educated on what we're doing, and at some point this topic or topics comes before town meeting, these will be folks that will be sitting in the room at town meeting that have a knowledge basis of what our vision is here. And quite honestly, has helped us shape the vision.
Yeah. It definitely worked with the
Being
building committee.
informed, yeah.
One other item from your last meeting to follow up on in case folks are interested. I am going to ask Scott Fitzpatrick to come to your next meeting. Kevin was available for today, but you all had questions about the ADU bylaw. He will be making a presentation to the select board on Tuesday, October 8th regarding that topic. So if you want a preliminary sense, and then the planning board as well next week on October 9th. We'll be discussing the ADU, but I certainly am going to try to work to have him come to your November meeting if he's available.
And that may be an additional future topic of education. I mean, if there's been anything in the last month or two that folks have brought up to me, it's about the ADU law. And, part of that is going to become clearer once the state promulgates the regulations around there, but there are going to be certain things that towns have the ability to do and towns don't have the ability to do. Part of that education will be that.
Yeah, and so I'm also obviously working that in my day-to-day too, so I'm definitely involved with all that ADU stuff, so
Okay.
I'll definitely be able to help on that, get into it.
Okay.
Good question. One of the things we could put in the newsletter is what is the definition of an affordable house? Do we have any sort of price ranges that, says between 250,000 to 400 is considered affordable? Or do we have lower numbers? I think it would be really good to go in that newsletter.
So I think, and I was looking at that when I was kind of editing this today, and I was thinking about that, and I didn't want to get into my big A and small a, lowercase, uppercase. I say this all the time just to get Jackie to smirk, but I think what we have to be careful with is that we're not talking in such a way that folks keep thinking about what I say, the stigma of affordable. When you say affordable is, this is a committee that's created to build opportunities for Section 8 housing, or build opportunities for a higher rise 5-6-story building that's going to stick out like a thumb in a neighborhood. That's not what this committee's focus is. Now, if there's an opportunity to do something truly big A affordable that meets the needs, the wants, and the character of the community, I think this committee would probably be all over it and supportive of it. But that's not the only focus of what we're looking at.
Sure.
So if you have thoughts, Terman or others, of how we can describe affordable,
Right.
Yeah.
and
Yeah, we can't
affordable
really put
is,
a price point on it because, you know,
Correct.
Well, it moves.
You know, it
It
does, it
slides,
goes up
it's
and down, it's all
continuous,
over the
yeah.
place.
Right.
no, it is affordable, the thing that we were talking about on the other property that the town owns is ways that we could make a development there be affordable. And that would be by deed restriction requiring that the building couldn't be more than X square footage, or couldn't take up more than Y square footage of the property, or possibly zoning changes that makes the lot smaller. Think about Brigadoon. Brigadoon is a development with smaller lots that is different than anywhere else in Middleton as a planned community, and that was planned that way for a reason. What happened is the rest of the developments that happened post there went to 1 and 2 acre minimums, and before you know it, it went from a 2,500 square foot building to a 3,000 to a 3,600 to a, and the list has gone on. Now you're seeing 4, 5, 6, 7,000 square foot homes being built that,
9, 10, 11, 12
Well, we-
square foot houses.
We could also, if we moved away, if we're already making, bigger changes, like, that's where allowing duplexes kind of things, or if the ADU's regulations come out and that solves it, like, those may very well cover those situations where now the housing can be denser and get
exactly.
more
And-
affordable.
And duplexes aren't, when people hear duplexes, again, that's another area where people, their minds go to something different. They think of,
Two-family.
an old two-family sitting in a city somewhere, units on top of each other. When developments are developed as multifamily developments, they can be developed in a way that fits the environment of the greater neighborhood, but also fits the property. And, and part of the effort that we deal with is we're, other than a very small area or town, we're septic only, and we're a very wet community. So being able to have septic that aligns to the number of units and the number of bedrooms, as what our septics are designed on now, there's a cost involved.
The one on Maple Street is very nice there.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
came out really nice.
Absolutely it did. And there is duplexes that were built off of,
A couple on East Street.
but the ones that were built off of the road going between Maple and,
Not Kings,
oh,
that side.
over near Flying Fox.
Oh, yeah, that's, yeah, I know what you're talking about, the development on Mill Street.
Yes, off of Mill Street.
Off of Mill
I
Street,
can't remember the name of the neighborhood that's there, but there were like 4 or 5 buildings that
Oh,
were
yeah,
built
yeah.
there. They're beautiful. They fit the neighborhood.
Mill
They,
Street?
yeah, off of,
Off of Liberty, go off of
the
Liberty Street.
Mill Street
go down
side
Mill
off of
Street.
Liberty.
Take Mill, and it's the first right.
It's diagonally across from Flying Fox Circle.
Oh, okay, okay.
Those are
Yes,
examples
yes.
of duplexes that were built because the zoning allowed it, and the developer at the time built it in a way that more units were, rather than build big, huge colonials. And most of the folks that have moved there are folks that have downsized. I mean, I think that's where, we all talk about downsizing and aging in place, but, I mean, I think we have to have more of a conversation to find out if that really is. Do folks want to downsize here? Or do they want to downsize and move? No, seriously, do they want to stay in this community?
So
Like,
then,
or,
is it more of a entry level? Because I think a lot of those in that cul-de-sac too, though, are also like entry level stuff. too.
Dolan Drive.
Yeah,
Dolan Drive, thank you
that's
very
the one.
much.
Yep.
Oh, that's the name
I
of
think
it?
I know. I have 2 friends that live in
Remember that.
Yeah, I have a good friend. I actually know the guy who built the first 3 in there.
But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it too was those entry levels. So, I mean, it serves a couple purposes, so.
And I think that the point that Kevin was talking about today from the Home Consortium is developers are moving from building and selling to building and renting. Now, whether they're going to own the rent or another organization is going to own it as a rental. And I mean, the reality is the volume of rental stock in Middleton is minuscule, absolutely minuscule.
Well, they did that on, when Brent McKinley did East Meadows. The second house in is a duplex. And that was part of the probe when he was doing that. They made, the planning board made sure he put something in that was, not a big giant monstrosity, but he's got, as soon as you come in the right, it's the second one on the right.
Yeah.
And it's a nice looking town. It's, it's a nice looking duplex, 2 townhouses, but they're attached. It's nice. You look over the meadow and stuff like that, and it's not like this big monstrosity, and the same thing with the two that were built on East Street. There's two on East Street, if you're going towards 62, on the left-hand side, they're nice, they're, good looking, they, they fit into the community, they're not just stuck out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, they were designed well. Like I say, in the one on Maple Street, same thing, just laid out well.
Yeah, the one that, Warren Kelly just built before you get to the church, on the right-hand side, where
Yeah.
Lenny Ferrera's family used to own
Yep.
right there.
Yeah, it's a very nice spot.
And I do want to be, watch out a little bit as we're publicizing that we don't, absolutely, affordable housing is a big range here, but I also don't want to, stigmatize Section 8, great thing
No, no,
about
no.
Section 8 from landlords is the rent always gets paid, right? These are programs, those are people who are missing in our communities right now versus.
I agree with that completely, but I use that as and I probably shouldn't, but I use it as an example of, that's where everybody goes when they hear affordable. And there's been this stigma of Section 8 means this, when the reality is, are there Section 8 units in Middleton? I guarantee you there are Section 8 units in Middleton that folks don't even realize.
Right.
And the character of our town hasn't changed. But when the dialogue becomes, the town of Middleton and the Affordable Housing Trust is working with the developer to build a project, it's gonna be Section 8, and now our character's gonna change. Well, no, it's not. And that's incumbent upon us to drive that. Nobody else is gonna start that
Absolutely.
dialogue and keep that dialogue on track. It's gotta be us. Okay, couple items else on the 5-year action plan. So our current deed restricted affordable housing. So we've done, Jackie, an inventory of it. We've identified which ones that we know, including those that, when we think expirations are going to happen. Is our planner going to be the point of contact for maintaining and ensuring that we understand what activities are happening to either keep them deed restricted or make outreach to hope that they're gonna stay deed restricted? Is that the planner's role?
Yes.
And
It
do
is
we
the-
have a planner?
It is the planner's role.
But we don't yet.
We anticipate having a planner soon.
Soon, okay.
And one of the things that I'm building into some of the training work that we're gonna do for the new person, we just didn't get to it with the previous planner, is going through the list, identifying the ones that are coming due soonest. And my intention is that by your January meeting, you'd have a list of anything that's coming offline. So if you wanted to apply for CPA funding for this coming town meeting cycle to buy any of those in perpetuity, you'd have the opportunity and the time to do so. We signed the trust document tonight, the declaration, which is important because then that gets filed with the registry of deeds and that allows you to spend the money you have. So all of those pieces are administratively coming together to enable that for the January meeting. But that's something too, where that, going through that list, that inventory is a great way for a new planner to get to know the community a little bit as well. So it's part of why we build it into the training.
The second topic of diversifying our housing stock. We have representatives of the planning board on this committee. We don't have anybody that's actually on, well, we do have somebody that's on the ZBA, but not here as a member of the ZBA. Is there a rationale, do board members think there's a rationale at some point that this committee or members of this committee should ask for time on a future agenda of the planning board and/or ZBA to talk about really what we started talking about during our whiteboarding sessions of how we can ensure that the planning board is always, and the ZBA is always keeping in their mind when developments are coming in, opportunities for a development to have an affordable component to it, or to have that as part of their toolbox in their negotiations with developers.
We've been talking about that on the planning board, me and Anthony have been talking about that, and that's something we're gonna try to implement, is, that's what it's gonna be, is when a developer comes to us wanting to get something approved, it's gonna be part of we wanna put it as part of the application process of, okay, you wanna put in 7 or 8 homes, you gotta make at least, say 15 to 20% of it's gotta be affordable.
Yeah, I think that's gonna require like more of a.
Exactly, it's gonna be more of a zoning issue, and that's what we're doing is but that's the other
thing.
thing we're doing is we're actually going through the process of doing zoning changes in Middleton. That was given to us by the Board of Appeals. We took the ball and ran with the different zoning areas, and we've been looking at different, areas that are gonna get more, not more congested, but just try to change the way the zoning is figured in town. And we've been going through that, but with getting new board members and stuff like that, we've been, because we had 3 new board members, so we're trying to push it around to see. But yeah, that was something we came up with is, not necessarily be on the application, but hey, suggest it to them, go, like, one of the things, if they do a development, we got the sidewalk fund. We make them, they have to do a donation to that. It's like, okay, well, can you do something for, and even if it's something to, like, I toss the idea around, if you're gonna do a development, how about toss something towards this board? Affordable Housing Trust, something that we can help to preserve the community, like you say, age in place and stuff like that. Maybe give a donation if you're doing a big development. If your zone restriction doesn't allow you to do what we want to do, maybe, throw some money towards this so we can help out, preserve the community and stuff like that,
So as a way to direct that conversation, would it make sense to have what we did last January where we had a joint meeting of the 3 boards? Yeah, because I think we're gonna, ideally new planners coming in, we still have grants for some of the rest of the zoning bylaw review. I know our building commissioner has some areas that he finds lack clarity.
Yes.
I've talked to him and I agree with those, and there's a couple of other spots too. So I know
Yeah.
from a ZBA standpoint, now that I've sat on it for a couple of years, there's definitely some changes that are needed to facilitate other pieces to make it more,
Absolutely.
I think, have a better aesthetic for the town. But I think, we would definitely be needing changes for inclusionary zoning. And that was something we talked about very early, but I mean, that's what we would need to be doing.
That's what
And I mean,
that's what Anthony and I have been talking about is inclusionary zoning, and we've been going over it and going over it.
So
and
Buzz,
going
do you
over
think
it.
there's a possibility that we're going to be looking at some proposed zoning changes at this spring town meeting?
Possibly, that's what me and Anthony are talking about, and especially now that this new ADU is hitting us hard. This is something else that we gotta go, we gotta go kind of headstrong on and, make
So
sure
to
we-
that point, I would recommend if there's going to be a recommendation for a joint board meeting of Housing Trust, I would actually recommend Housing Trust, Select Board, Planning Board, and ZBA.
ZBA.
I agree.
That if that's going to happen, we probably want to do that by like December, January, because at that point, there's going to be, if there's going to be any type of zoning activity that's going to happen at town meeting,
We gotta get it.
we want to get ahead
like
of,
February.
before the zoning process starts.
I will just put a realistic timeline out there. If it's zoning for May 2025, we're very close to too late already.
Right. I would agree.
I think from my standpoint, like, I certainly don't want to dampen the enthusiasm for it because I know it's been a long time coming. But I do think there's something, I would be, if you're going to do the level of comprehensive zoning work that needs to be done, that I think you've both just alluded to, for the level of public education to be done, and I think it's May 26.
I mean, this is what happened last time. When we had that joint board meeting, we talked about all these different pieces. I'm like, there's just not enough time
Right.
to.
And we also
get
had
get the word, I mean.
MBTA.
Buzz, you sat in on it, right?
Yeah, we were
I mean,
here.
It's the same idea. They were
We had
talking about
the
the
I was the one
ADUs too,
that,
and
I was
we
the
have
one that
state
said,
stuff coming.
that's when I
that-
suggested to the
Yeah,
planning
there's-
board and everybody, I said, I said, let's get a joint meeting, that's when we had the meeting in January, because,
also had the municipal
at
project.
planning board, we're talking about the same things, at ZBA, you guys talk about the same things, select board gets involved, and it's like, all right, let's get everybody together, and everybody just,
But I think
and
we
just see
also-
what everybody's gonna do, and even if it doesn't hit the May, even if,
there's a
we have
fall.
another year, it just, what killed us was the MTA zone. That killed everything that we had been
that's
working on and
across
stuff like
all
that.
communities.
Well, I mean, I think we
We
have not done anything comprehensive on zoning for multiple years because of a slew of items. Some of them was town meeting just didn't have the appetite after some past activities. Secondly, it was the focus on the municipal project, and then it was the focus on the shortfall in the municipal project, and then it was the MBTA zoning was dropped on our lap
And
like a
Masco
ton of
roof,
bricks.
the Masco
Then the
roof.
Masco issues and others, and the operational override.
Yeah.
And,
It's too much.
well, and it was too much, but I feel that at some point, if we're gonna start turning the corner on, if not, what's gonna happen is we're gonna be talking about zoning changes that are never gonna have an effect because things have already been developed there.
Correct.
That
Yeah.
the door's closed.
Yep,
Right.
yep, I agree.
So,
I mean, it could be a fall. I mean, is there typically a
I will
special?
tell you,
Is
the
that how it
town
works?
has historically not done zoning changes in a special town meeting environment,
Yep.
mainly for the fact that we believe that zoning, at least the select board has historically, and not just this board, previous boards have upheld the same belief. And I think the planning board, I mean, the finance committee has taken a similar position of zoning should not be in a special town meeting.
Okay.
Even though
Do we know
special
the
has become
numbers?
almost like a second annual.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of.
I was gonna ask, do we know numbers on attendance of special versus non? Because I,
Usually
think it
not that
mostly-
much different,
No.
but.
from
we
my
usually-
experience, it seems like if you have turf on there, you get a bigger turnout and time of year matters less, right?
I think it's hard because there are some people that will be automatically not interested in voting on zoning because it is a special, because I think while we have been, the size of our organization and our financial complexity has required specials of the community. And sometimes there's been specials. The year that we came back for the funding for the municipal campus, the two articles that were time sensitive on there were the municipal campus and funding some union contracts that had been settled that summer. So I would say we, even on the staff side, we work really hard that when a special exists, we try to keep it as light as possible because we recognize the appetite is different from the voters.
We're having a special this year, but it's gonna be
In December, right?
very
December, yeah.
short, small, because there's one topic we have to address.
Which is that, the roof here?
Yeah, the roof here, if
That's the
not.
only item?
Well, that's, right now, is that the only item?
When also, and we're talking about on Tuesday with the select board and Wednesday with the planning board, the ADU state legislation goes into effect on February 2nd, 2025. So if we want to do any sort of regulation in relation to that ADU, we have to do it before then, because they've timed the implementation prior to a majority of the town meetings in the spring,
Right.
which feels a little by design, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
I'm sure.
And if we don't address town meeting action on the roof for this building, we're gonna lose the state funding.
Yeah, but I thought the roof, they still hadn't done the, what is that, the approval, that it wasn't gonna come through until October, November, so how are you doing a special
No,
meeting on the roof?
We've been notified that we're eligible, but we have to provide to the state that we actually have a funding mechanism.
They've
for
already
it.
said that? I thought that wasn't gonna come through
Yeah,
until
they've said that, correct?
October.
I just know that it's on the table.
It's
I know
not gonna-
MSBA came and did the site visit. We don't know what the total is because it depends on how much they're approving for the roof
Yeah,
as well
so-
as
Wouldn't
if they're
have a
approving.
meeting.
So when we go to town meeting for approval for a project like this, we go to town meeting for approval for the full project,
whole project.
not what the amount would be after state reimbursement.
Right.
Oh, that wasn't my understanding.
Oh, no, that's how, for example, like,
That's how they all work, yeah.
our school, like our our Howe Manning School, town meeting approval funded the entire cost of the project. I think about 39% of it is funded through SBA. That comes as an annual fund to the town, but we were already approved for the full amount at town meeting. It's the same way for the roof. We go to town meeting for the full approval, but then we would get annually from SBA an amount to offset whatever that state. And so what we have to show SBA is we actually have approval for the full funding. If not, they're gonna say, we're gonna go to the next town on the list.
But if they haven't come forth yet, as Jackie just said, I don't know how you plan on
It'll be in
having
December, though,
a
so by
meeting
that
in
point, it'll be
December.
already worked out,
need-
so-
when
No, they've
one's-
already come
it's pretty
forward and said
difficult
that we've made the first cut. I mean, we're in the process.
in the process, but they haven't made a
I mean,
decision.
not to get too far off of an agenda topic that isn't necessarily on your agenda. We
Yeah, but
have,
it's pretty dicey to do these things in December, in my opinion.
I mean, I think that's definitely been the topic that December is not ideal,
No,
but
of course not.
not wanting to lose out on a project, we await information from MSBA,
That-
that's the deciding factor, and when we have that information, we're gonna certainly share it.
But if we await, my opinion is this is the last on this topic, if we wait to May, it may be too late.
That one makes more sense. Is the idea being that we would bring zoning changes just to limit ADUs in a special meeting?
I would say that that's a topic better saved for Tuesday's select board meeting when the building commissioner makes his presentation.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so
I don't think it's
I do want
necessarily
to, I want to
limit-
bring it up
It
because,
might not be necessarily limiting, it might just be, because you have to create regulations to, so it's not just the Wild West and people can do whatever they want, so you gotta, you still have to
Right.
It'd be a
update.
local bylaw.
It's like
You have that local
Linfield-
bylaw to rein in the
Well-
approach.
It's like
But
Linfield is
reining
making
in,
them,
right.
the health
That's
director.
Well, you have to
is
limit, you have to have
making
some
them,
boundaries.
whoever wants to
They're
do an
just willy-nilly.
ADU, the first thing they have to do is they have to get a Title V inspection.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
makes
So,
sense.
So
That-
the
well,
first
that's a
thing they have
I
given
just,
anyway, yeah.
I just, I'm
It's not
concerned
part
that
of
we're
the
like
plan
not
right
willing
now,
to
but that's
bring
what she's
zoning
doing.
changes that would expand affordability to a special town meeting, but we're considering zoning changes that would potentially limit affordability, depending on what they end up being. I don't know.
I think that I want to be clear that there will be a presentation, as far as I know, it's still on the schedule for the October 8th select board meeting, of what the bylaw, what the state legislation of ADU encompasses, and what our building commissioner is asking for in terms of local regulation of that legislation.
Yeah.
And he's coming in October because we just got it at the end of August, and there's a time sensitivity component because the law takes effect
In February.
in February, creating a situation where many cities and towns will not have a town meeting. That is a
That's
And
regular.
if cities and towns have not done something to set some parameters,
Yep.
come February, whatever the date is,
Second.
February 2nd, then in the town of Middleton, ADUs can occur in a way that may not be in the best interest of Middleton, that if we're addressing in the future at a future town meeting, there'll be two different types of ADU developments that have happened. Do I think there's dozens and dozens of people that are ready to put a shovel in the ground? No. But at a minimum, we as a town have to have a discussion on this.
You have to be ready.
And
I think most of it,
unfortunately,
like,
the
most
state's
communities are
forced
just
it.
looking at having some type of site plan review process. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, and saying, okay, you've got to meet your setback requirements, like that type of thing.
The
So
Title
it's
V
not,
is
because our
special.
legislation is so broad.
Well, because if
to allow
not, then
everything.
it's going to be,
Right.
here's the permit I'm applying for, and building commissioners are going to be overwhelmed with
Mm.
making decisions that are going to end up
Yeah.
having your board, the ZBA, be overwhelmed as well.
We prefer not to have that happen.
Yeah. Okay, so,
Yeah.
diversifying housing stock, part of that is future activities around zoning. I think this board is at least unanimous, probably vehemently in agreement of, we want to be a voice in that process. We're not a process in determining it. There's certain boards that play that, but how we can be helpful in leaning in on that, but also making sure that we are, to your point, Beth, doing things that are increasing opportunities and maybe not doing things that are decreasing opportunities, or doing things that are doing things that are in the best interest of the town.
So with that being
So go to
said,
October
What?
8th meeting. Is that what
That
you're
being-
saying, Brian?
Yeah, October 8th meeting, if you can't be there,
The
watch it
select
on
board.
demand.
Yeah. Info.
for a future joint meeting, so we are hoping to have a planner appointed by the end of the fall. So it may be good to do it in January again, because I think it's before the season of budgeting gets a little too busy, and it will give our planner that will hopefully exist a little bit of time to get their feet wet.
Good idea.
Would that be,
I'd be comfortable with that.
I think
Jason, Bill, can I ask you to bring that back to your respective boards? And see
Absolutely.
if like early January would work again?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like it.
Okay, supporting seniors aging in place.
What are you reading from?
So the topic that at least I keep coming back to and we've talked about is funds and the potential of utilizing funds as part of, right now, the,
293.
I was going to say 290. Thanks, Rich. $328.72 that we have in the account. At some point, we're not going to be successful going back to town meeting and asking for CPA dollars every year. The only thing we're doing is moving it from the left side of the ledger to the right side of the ledger and hoarding it in a fund. At some point, we need to be asking town meeting for the dollars and the allocation of the dollars, but what we're doing with that. An area that I think we can actually make some headway is, regardless of what Kevin was talking about today, is some funds that we could put together to support individuals that may have some aging in place needs. Quite honestly, the way many of these opportunities are going to be identified is through the work and the outreach work that our Council on Aging is doing. That's how we found about individuals that have had needs in their homes. That's, we have a fund in town that somebody had bequeathed to the town years ago that we use to assist individuals with heating needs, whether it's their electricity bills or their gas, their propane or their gas needs or their oil needs during the winter. Many of the individuals that have come to that fund have come through the Council on Aging because they've identified individuals that are at need. As they're identifying individuals at the Council on Aging that have need for aging in place, whether it's simple items like grab bars or a ramp or other items like that, or even maybe greater items, I think at some point in the very near future, we have to come up with, if this is something that we want to do for aging in place, or at least allowing folks to stay in their home, but stay in their home in a safe manner, is coming up with a program, but also a program that says we're going to dedicate X percentage or Y dollars towards that. And then see if there's an appetite out there. As we're talking to seniors at the Council on Aging or elsewhere, we can highlight this program. So,
How much?
We probably need to, I was gonna say parameters before we went, how much? I was thinking parameters as to what we wanna do. I mean,
Well-
we could easily burn through all 300 grand without even batting an eye. So
Right.
if we're just doing grab bars and ramps or something like that, that's a lot more.
That's
Viable,
why I was asking for how much. Is like how big sort of check sizes are we thinking about, and then how are we who's staffing it, and how are we paying for that?
Yeah.
so here's what I'd ask. If there are individuals that would like to work on this offline, if there's one or two individuals that would like to focus on this area of, some of that would be probably starting a conversation with Jillian and the COA about what are they seeing, what are they hearing, if at all, maybe not at all, from their members, and what are the needs that are out there. Simultaneously, Kevin talked to us today about the program that Peabody has. That is a very small program, and, I'm not looking for a $150,000 project to keep somebody in their home by, gutting and renovating bathrooms and so forth. That's not what the business of this housing trust is.
Part of why I bring up numbers is because if you haven't had anything renovated in your home very recently, the costs are unbelievable
That's what
compared to where they
Kevin was
were.
saying. That's what happened.
So are we
Could we
thinking
put a
like,
number that's exact? Oh, sorry.
no, I was just saying, are we thinking like a $25,000 max in this 5 projects, and now it's 125, and then that's all we're doing? I mean,
Right,
but
that's it.
what does that project entail? mean,
Well, I think it's
that's the
hard to
question.
say what the budget would be until we understand what the parameters are that we want to do. I mean, are these going to be very small projects that can make a difference to allow somebody to stay at home rather than end up in some type of assisted or skilled nursing?
But I think some research, Brian, to go back, I'm sorry to interrupt you,
Yeah.
but I think you're right. You started off with that, is having one or two of us board members speak to the COA person, because we don't know, we're
Well,
not
it's
inside
the
that.
COA person, but it's also looking at what other towns that we
That-
know
well,
have
sure,
done things. We
that
know
too.
Peabody has. Are there other towns that have done things?
But I'm saying, starting with our town, just to get an understanding, I think you'll get a wealth of information.
Do I think there's probably a need? I think there's
I would think so.
absolutely likely a need. I mean, I think some of it is accessibility, others is health and safety need. There are folks that are struggling to stay in this community as costs have gone up, from property tax, utility costs, to every other cost, as their pension or income hasn't kept pace, that, as Kevin was talking about today, significant deferred maintenance in their home has had an effect.
Sure.
We're not going to be the silver bullet to solve this, folks, but if there's somebody that shows up at the Council on Aging or through our Veteran Service Officer or others that could make a huge difference, with a small amount of money. And then we understand what that is and say, okay, we want to designate X percentage of our 293,000 to start this, and these are the parameters. And then build parameters around it and notify the Council on Aging, we now have this program, this is what it looks like, as you identify folks. I would say we also had that same conversation with the school department, who many times it's the schools that understand when individuals within their school population are struggling with needs as well.
So do you
So I
think
don't mind-
maybe, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Maybe a good, but you can only, like you said, do so much, but I think a good start is what you said at the beginning. One or two of us goes to that council and you start there, because if you start going bigger and bigger, then it balloons and you can't handle any of it. So maybe starting at the council on aging, making a report back, and then go to the next one.
I think
Okay.
the
I don't
other,
know what you guys think of that.
the other thing I think would be useful is to have a conversation with Habitat for Humanity, because it sounds like they've got like contracts out the staffing of the program as well.
That's a good idea.
To
Yeah,
them.
they
And
did
so
come
ask
in-
them how much it costs for the 1 to 2 things a year, and if we can just do that.
They came, remember they did?
Yeah,
they were-
yeah.
So
the one was
years
great.
ago, when I lived
Yeah.
in Wakefield,
Like
we
what
had a
commitment
program in
was made.
Wakefield
Yeah.
that basically provided exactly what Kevin was talking about. It was a no-interest loan that you didn't have to make a payment. And there were two different ways that it was run. One of them was, it was basically added on your property as like a deed lien. So in the future, if that property was ever sold 20 years from now,
Yep.
and the town of Wakefield had provided $5,000 for updates, that $5,000 would be paid back to the town. That's an option. The other option is, it's a loan that could turn into a grant. Like, if,
Right. I think I was more interested in the structure around it. Like he said, their enforcement, that's one of the limiting factors on a lot of these things, is who does the work. Yeah, how do we manage the
and this may be
So
the
if we
beginning
could-
of a relationship that we develop with Habitat of Humanity. Habitat for Humanity that begins with, we want to take a small step into supporting aging in place or ability for individuals to remain in town around accessibility and/or life and safety updates.
Right. And so if they can tell us, yeah, for 75K, we can get that going for you next year, that becomes a very easy conversation, I think, to have.
I'd be happy to tag in on that conversation with Habitat.
Great.
Beth, you
So, and I
interested in
think-
doing it too, or do you want me to just take the lead?
I've got something already
You
on my
already got
plate,
one?
so
I'll
you
take this
take
one,
this
that's
one.
fine.
So I think,
Yeah.
Herman, you
And
were
then
going to
Herman.
say
So
that
I'm
you-
on the board on the COA, so I'm happy to take it up with with Jillian. The other thing around health and safety is, believe it or not, I was trying to get a program where seniors can have their keys easily available to police and fire for welfare checks instead of breaking down the door. So we could include probably that as part of a, how do we help people age in place? But also another idea we could have is, I was also on the Friends on the Council on Aging. What about if we said, look, we're going to give you X amount of dollars and you match, or you also contribute some dollars, right, to helping make seniors stuff accessible or doing repairs. And I think that's not a bad question to ask. So we're not funding it 100%. We might do 90% and they do 10%.
Okay.
Sounds like we got two guys on
So,
that.
Bill, Herman,
Yep.
we're going to task you two with kind of starting the process of the discussion, both with the Council on Aging and Habitat for Humanity, and then maybe taking a peek at what Peabody's doing or other communities are doing around here, and then report back with us.
Plymouth had a really good program in terms of
Who did? Plymouth?
had a really good program in terms of documentation. That's one that Anthony found while he was on the trust. So that might be a good starting point. They had really good guidance documents, if I recall.
Okay.
Not geographically as similar, but it was well-conceived program.
Most communities that are receiving CDBG dollars directly have programs like this, but they're usually a revolving program, which is what I described, which is there's a lien put on the property. When that property is sold in the future, it's a payback. No interest, no payments that are done, and sometimes it's just forgiven.
Yeah, I think that's what they do in Peabody. My mother-in-law actually got one of the services. Like, they ended up replacing her, I want to say, like, water heater or something like that, just as part of a block grant, so.
And again, life and safety.
Yeah.
It's not just accessibility.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Nice.
And I think that also falls into the ensuring safe and quality homes piece, around building code violations and others. You know, we've had cases of individuals in town that have been struggling with issues around hoarding and others that have put them at risk of no longer being able to remain in their home. And many times it's been the Board of Health Director and/or the building commissioner that has worked with owners and residents to connect them with organizations that have helped them around there. But we've had other efforts that folks have been in jeopardy of not being able to stay in their home. You know, some of it is, it's, you know, fire department or ambulance has arrived at a home and found significant life safety needs. Those items, not surprisingly, come up every day in Middleton as they come up in every town. And again, as you guys work on what this program would look like, is there ways that that could be utilized as well? And then maybe back to your point, Buzz, of if developers are looking to, as part of a project maybe where they can't do anything affordable because the zoning doesn't allow it, or other items that are willing to make a financial investment in either the housing trust or other efforts, that may be an opportunity. I mean, we had a developer that made a significant investment on the sale of every unit into the Council on Aging to support efforts. That goes a long way to programs that are actually, the COA is supporting seniors. We talked about informed decision-making and the communication that we're happening, as well as enhanced community awareness. So I think we've kind of run the gamut on the 7 topics. I don't know if there's anything else that folks want to add to the mix on that?
Did somebody want to maybe follow up? We got a couple of names that we heard tonight of developers that have been.
Yeah, so I wrote some of these names down. Harbor Light and Beverly. I actually have a friend, I think Gretchen's on their board. I think she's still on their board.
I think she, last time I was,
So-
she is.
I will tell you, Harbor Light, big entity, doing phenomenal things, and they've moved from when they were a small organization to doing small projects to now very large in their, they're looking not just at housing, of that whole wraparound services.
Yeah,
as you heard.
Cummings Property, I run my surgical company I work for, we lease a building off of Cummings, and they actually donate money to Harbor Light every year. They donate almost $30 million a year to community preservation funds and everything around there. And I know the director real well, so I can always call him and see, how they go about stuff like that.
So I can task myself, if folks are okay with this, I'll have a conversation with Kevin Hurley, understand, like, he named some of them, Harbor Light, North Shore Community Development Coalition. Now, Wind Development, I'm very familiar with them. Wind's not coming to Middleton to do a project.
No.
If they are, it's
think
probably
Harbor
gonna be a
Light's coming
project we don't want.
Right.
But the Planning Office of Urban Affairs, that's the archdiocese that was really created around the closure of churches, and they were either going to sell the property or they wanted to do something, so they developed this organization that is actually partnering with other developments. Unless the church in Middleton is closing, that's not really an option here. But I'll work with Kevin to see if we can look at applicants that he's had in the last 3 or 4 RFP rounds, that we can just look at their, like, who they are, and maybe we can start having some conversations. Do I think having a conversation with Harbor Light would be helpful? Maybe, maybe not, but I think we have a local resident that's on their board that may be able to provide some insight
I have a
to us.
relationship with the executive director from my last community as well, because they did a project in my last community, a smaller community than this, actually. For the 6 years I was there, we were working on it, so let me know if you need backup.
But I also think part of that is, like the question I asked of Kevin, there's a potential that my board is going to do an RFI that's going to go out about the property on Locust Street of, is there an appetite out there by a developer to do something that's different? Because we're either going to possibly sell the property and somebody's going to develop it into 12, 14 big homes. Or is there an appetite to do something different? that may fall within the zoning requirements that we would put restrictions on that state that the, building would be smaller, it would look different, and it would keep it affordable,
What about
rather
a
than.
local initiative project, where you kind of send that out and have them come in that way.
That
That's
could
a-
be part of it, and,
It gives you folks a
Well-
really good bite at the apple there on that.
But I also think these conversations with potential developers and organizations, not-for-profits, that have been looking for these funds,
Yep.
it would be a worthwhile discussion to have with these groups so they can at least understand that as a town, not just as this board, but as a town, we're looking more collaboratively and comprehensively at this.
I mean, I'm happy to tag in on it, because I'm doing it for 2 projects in Wakefield too, so,
Okay.
yeah, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bill and I will take the initiative of going back with Kevin and
Getting some developers and talking.
the Home Consortium, but also, and we can work with coming up with some efforts around, I think probably the next step is not just the Home Consortium, but also the conversation you're going to have with
Habitat.
Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah, if I'm already doing that, I think maybe we just kind of tag team it all, and we
Okay.
can talk to the developers together and stuff too.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Good, okay. Next on the agenda is scheduling meetings. We have a November 6th and a December 4th on the books. I think we surely have agenda items for November 6th. It looks like, if all goes well, we will have our building commissioner in on the 6th, Jackie. And I think on the November 6th, for the agenda, we're going to have some updates on some of the work groups that we've just started talking about here. Beth and I will probably have for the board kind of our stump speech slash materials around there, and updates to, proposed updates that we're going to do in our communication strategies. We'll probably have some updates on Habitat and Home, some updates on Council on Aging and efforts around efforts of low and no-cost options to assist with modifications. And then Rich, as our treasurer, continue to think about if we, and I know you started to extrapolate on future fiscal years, but if we,
The opposite side of the page is a 5-year.
of, if we are successful just on transfers from the CPC and it stays at a level funding, what would that look like?
I also put a placeholder in for potential town meeting, giving us some money.
And I would argue, and if we come back with a successful opportunity around home modifications, that maybe this committee may want to bring to town meeting and ask for a direct investment from town meeting. And, I think, again, if we keep asking for money and we hoard it, at some point,
Not gonna go
they
along.
should say no. And quite honestly, his board's going to start saying no,
Yeah.
as they should.
I
Okay,
will be remote for the 6th, the meeting on the 6th.
okay.
I won't be able to attend the 6th.
Will you be able to do
1
remote?
a.m. in Sweden.
No, I won't be, I'll be out,
Okay.
sorry.
Keep a heads up on remote.
Now, we have December 4th on the schedule as well. I'd like to keep it now. We can assess that in November if we think we need it. What I would like to do after the December meeting is kind of set an agenda for the coming year of meetings. Again, I think during the summer, we can scale back some unless we have some bigger items.
And I'll add a official, I realized, Richard, I'm sorry, I didn't include a budget report from you on the agenda called out. I'll add that for November.
Great.
Mr. Chair, before you adjourn, can I have Herman sign the trust declaration on camera for notarization purposes?
And just one note, Brian, as we discussed the last meeting, I'm going to do some training with Jackie later on in October, and then she'll drop off of these meetings, and I'll take over
Yep.
for the next meeting.
Yeah, I hope to bring a new planner to your November meeting, if I'm able,
Oh, good,
for introduction purposes.
great, that means you're close. Yes.
If not, you can always email
do that, Jack.
housingtrust@middleton.gov and get in touch with Jackie.
Be there every day.
748, whatever the number was.
Yeah, go to our website,
735 /
7489.
affordable dash housing
What's
dash.
that song? There's a song. It made me think of that song. I can't
Jackie, do
think
we
of
have
it.
any backups for that email address in case you are not around, like on holiday?
No, but we can do that. Whoever would like it.
No, thanks.
There's a lot of traffic, let me tell you.
I mean, as we continue to promote it, I mean, I think we should have that.
I think it
You gotta check it, right?
previously went to the admin in our office, which we will have a new admin in our office again by the end of October.
Great.
So I can set it up so that our admin in our office, so there's two of us.
Great.
I don't think, I hope no one's reaching out to us with urgency and more just curiosity, but I can make sure that the admin services coordinator is put on it when she starts.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have any items that they would like to see on the next agenda? And as I said before, prior to the deadline when we post this meeting, if there are any agenda items you would like to see added, or any individual or group you'd like to see before the committee, just give us a little bit of a heads up and we'll make it happen. If it's just a topic you want on the agenda, maybe not somebody attending, as long as you get it to me the Friday prior or the Thursday, when do we post these?
48 hours.
I tend to try to do it on Thursday, Friday at the latest. The drop dead is Mondays. but
So I
hate
would
to
say
be
if,
close.
the Thursday prior to our Wednesday meeting, that would kind of be for me, the drop dead. If you reach out to me and say, hey, Brian, I'd like to have an agenda item to talk about A, B, or C, you ask her, we'll put it on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
And we're
Thank
adjourned.
you.